Right now, we need to plant over 100,000 hectares per year up to the year 2040 to be able to go back to 24% of the pre-1990 forest cover. So for us to do that, we need to have over 40 million trees planted every year to be able to recover. But you see, continuous. The most recent is Chituburu forest in Ntinda. You saw the reports. So when you look at most of the natural forests, whether you're talking about Zoka forest in Adjumani, whether you're talking about Budongo forest, whether you're talking about my very own Bugoma forest, whether you're talking about Mabira, all these forests are all under attack. So there's no way we are going to restore our ecosystems and restore our forest cover when we continue cutting down these natural forests. Because you see, we talk about carbon sequestration. So the forestry arrangement, although we promote agroforestry, but we must also first conserve.
This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Welcome back to the Policy Digest podcast by the Center for Policy Analysis. As you could be aware, for the last 13 years, the Center for Policy Analysis has been creating bridges between evidence and policy. We want a world where laws and policies are driven by evidence, and we are going to continue doing this until God comes back or Jesus comes back, or I don't know whether other regions also believe in their gods coming back. But the idea is we're here to do that. And in order to do that, we have to look at the issues that affect our country and how we can organize differently to ensure that we're not missing the bigger picture, that we're not measuring on minors and not measuring on what is measured. What is true for a fact is that everyone lives under a sun and has an environment. And as we have seen over the years, Uganda has been at a critical intersection between its ambitions from a development perspective to protecting its environment. Its global commitments, while they look firm, have had fundamental challenges. And just a while ago, we had a conversation and it ended at a critical point, and we just want to pick it up from there. One of the guests, and who now we have hosted in the CEPA studios, did say that the way we seek justice for crimes committed against the environment, but also against people who are affected by the environment, is still at its nascent stages. And as a developing governance ecosystem or democracy, it's important for us to get into those specific aspects on the case for an environmental court system in Uganda to create that ground. So for this podcast, we are joined by John Robert Turyakira. John Robert Turyakira is a prominent Ugandan environmental and human rights defender recognized for his extensive work in environmental rights and climate justice. He currently serves as the executive director of the African Green Health Network, and previously he held a position of deputy director of the Environmental Shield, a civil society organization dedicated to promoting environmental sustainability and justice. He has litigated a lot of cases in that specific manner. He's a former speaker of the Environmental Parliament and was awarded Uganda's most outstanding and most impactful human rights defender. In 2022, Robert was profiled as one of Uganda's unsung heroes that are crusading towards ensuring the rights of the environment and the people in that environment to matter. Beyond his organizational roles, Robert has been actively engaged in community activities, particularly ensuring that we re-energize youth agency in peace building and environmental advocacy. And it's important to notice that this is work he does daily. If you follow his social media handles, mainstream media like NTV, NBS, he's a leading voice, and CEPA could not be more proud to host Robert.
Yes.
Our honor to have you here.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for being generous in introducing me. Yes, as you said, my name is Robert Turyakira. I am really very glad to be part of this very timely conversation. I want to salute CEPA for the incredible work that you're doing. And of course, also being innovative, especially coming up with the policy digest, a very, very incredible game changer, especially in shaping civic conversations. Personally, I have been, a religious follower of this, conversation, and I must say that you are really shaping. You bring to the fore about most of the critical issues. And today, I am happy to be part of this, this conversation, especially to speak about issues of environment and climate change. I must say that I am profoundly happy that you can actually think about issues of environment and climate change, because truth of the matter is that these are not things that really excite everybody, especially when it comes to, mainstream media. You see that, when you watch most of the mainstream news stories, there is a lot of attention to political issues, even in the human rights space. The tendency of concentrating on civil and political rights is very, very prevalent. But, it gives me hope and excitement to see that you are really, as CEPA, you are really looking at the issue of climate change. I must say that to the viewers, climate change right now is ranked globally as the number one critical challenge that we are facing as a global community, especially when you look at how the communities, especially the most vulnerable communities, how they're being ravaged by climate-related disasters. When you talk about, for example, the triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, how the most vulnerable in our communities are really being affected. It's very, very, very important that you give space to this kind of conversation. And personally, who has been really on the front line of this for a long time, it gives me gratification that we have an opportunity to add a voice, especially on what role we can play as citizens. Because time and again, we talk about some of these things, but it is also important that we focus on what actions are we undertaking as a people. Because as we talk about the challenges that we are facing as far as environment and climate change issues are concerned, it is important that we also focus on what are we doing to salvage the little that is left. What can we do as citizens to try and see that we bridge and complement the work that governments globally are doing? But also, how do we leverage both global and regional efforts to try and to see that we salvage and work together, as organizations, as private sector, as the academia, as citizens, to try to see that we can be able to combat this global problem called climate change. So for me, it's really a good opportunity.
That's a very powerful opening statement. And like I said last time, the environment has a voice in you. I haven't met someone who speaks so profoundly on issues of environment like you. Just to set space for the conversation, this conversation is set within the context of environmental justice. You say that people tend to heavily rely on civil and political rights and not environmental justice. It occurs to me, maybe, that they don't even know what it is. So let's start there.
Yeah.
What is environmental justice?
Well, environmental justice is, I wouldn't want to go into the dictionary definitions, but to the viewer out there, if you pose the same question, environmental justice is a crisis in my view, a crisis that many people find themselves in every day. And for us who really are trying to advocate for environmental justice, we've been trying to make sure that we try to build a nexus between environmental issues and human rights issues, and therefore giving it a social justice lens. That you find that what is this relationship between environmental degradation and livelihoods of the people, the human rights, the well-being of the people. Because when you look at, for example, our Constitution, Article 39, it states that every Ugandan has a right to enjoy a clean and healthy environment. But then the same Constitution and Article 17, it provides that every Ugandan has a duty to create a clean and healthy environment. So environmental justice is what you can call a catchword, a defining term that brings all these issues together: people's livelihoods, people's human rights, and people's well-being. And therefore, you should be able to interrogate Because time and again, this has also been a critical issue, and you've said it in that people don't even understand these things.
Yeah, they don't.
Yes. So if you're going to fight for restoration of that wetland, if you're going to fight for the conservation of a given forest,
yes, sure.
How does that connect with the livelihood of the people? Because it's not just about only fighting for the environment, but also fighting for the well-being of the people. And therefore, the question of environment, everything surrounding us, but then justice, equity, inclusiveness, people's participation is very critical at that stage. And therefore, the long and short of what environmental justice is a calling for ensuring that there is inclusive, just, and equitable protection of people's rights to ensure that they enjoy a right to a clean and healthy environment, where we as human beings, we as entire biodiversity can exist in this environment, in this space called the environment. But at the same time, when we are also, we are enjoying the environment, but at the same time, when we are conserving the environment. So that this generation, which is actually enjoying this environment and the environmental resources, can actually be able to live, but also the generations to come can also find the same, the same resources and enjoy them. So the question therein is the issue of environmental sustainability. That how do you enjoy environmental resources, but at the same time when you are ensuring that there is sustainability to that effect. And that's why under the question of environmental justice, the issue of development, which you have raised, how do you strike the balance that you actually can have development, but at the same time still observe environmental sustainability?
So Robert, my mother is a teacher. My father is a teacher as well, and my mother taught English. So there's something called etymology. They look at the root of a word, who coined it. At what point in time does the word environmental justice start to become a thing in the history of our civilization? And what angle does it take? What's the history of the word and how it has been applied in different contexts? Those that could even be just out of our context here, Africa or Uganda.
Well, it dates back to, if I could, the viewer, probably you've been following this conversation, but if you've not been following the conversation around issues of environmental justice, issues of sustainable development, it dates back from when they had a conference in 1950, the first conference about living in harmony with nature. It was, I think, in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, called the Rio Conference, for the first time, where we had that conversation about sustainable development and ensuring that we can live in harmony with nature. That conversation continued to a city in Sweden called Stockholm, where for the first time there was a declaration that we as a global community must now embark on a journey on how we can build sustainable development, where you can actually have a balance between development but at the same time environmental sustainability. Now that convention continued. I will later on talk about what was formed later on in 1992, the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. That for the first time, the global community agreed in one framework that going forward, whatever development we are going to undertake is going to be premised on sustainable development, ensuring that there is environmental sustainability, that all developments must ensure environmental safeguards and environmental standards. Of course, we must remember that at the formation of the UN in 1945, there are three critical pillars of the formation of the UN. The first one was to maintain world peace. Second was to observe human rights, but also third was to observe sustainable development. Now, the concept of sustainable development has been the heartbeat of the discussion around environmental justice. Now, the UNFCCC from 1992, now countries started joining the UNFCCC, which established now the global conversation. And you've been
1992.
You've been talking about the issue of before we said we were talking about the issue of COP, which is a global climate summits that have been taking place every year. This year we are going to have COP 30 just later on 11th of next week, the COP30 is going to be taking place. So every year there's always been a global climate summit to see how we can harness global efforts towards combating climate change. So the conversation around, environmental justice, globally has been developing, has been work in progress. That after the UNFCCC, which is United Framework Convention on Climate Change, they gave rise to what we call the Kyoto Protocol. That for the first time, the Kyoto Protocol established what we call the polluter pays principle. That every person who is found in doing development but is breaching the very laid out environmental principles will actually be held liable, and therefore that is the principle under polluter paid principle. So, like I said, some of these at international level, whether it is international environmental law, whether it's about all these conversations, the multinationals, the multilaterals, it's been a work in progress, especially at the UN level, but also within the different regional bodies. Now, what I can really emphasize and what gave rise to the real discussion about environmental justice was the 2015-2016 signing of the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris Agreement, for the first time, brought together all global voices, global actions, every country committing that they are actually going to play their role in ensuring that we combat climate change. Because the Paris Agreement came at the backdrop of the Sustainable Development Goals, the signing of the Sustainable Development Goals. And SDG 13, which lays out climate action, let's say that every person is going to, every party, because at that level when you talk about countries, you're talking about parties. So every state party under the UNFCCC framework, being guided by the Paris Agreement, is going to ensure that they play what you call a contributory role under the principle called the common but differentiated responsibility. That every country must ensure that we make climate ambitions towards achieving environmental justice. So now, this has been ongoing, and I'm talking about 2015, 2016, that's about 10 years ago. So now, at the national level, apart from really what has been happening at the global level, at the national level, I told about the Constitution, our national Constitution. It was very categoric. Under Article 17, giving the duties of a citizen. Article 39, laying out the rights of every citizen, especially in enjoying the clean and healthy environment. But also Article 245, laid out commanding that the Parliament of Uganda shall legislate, put in place laws to ensure that as a country we uphold sustainable development, but also ensure that we have environmental justice. So the Constitution being the grand norm, the national Constitution lays out those principles of environmental justice. And then going forward, through the command of Article 245, in 2015, we had the establishment of the National Environment Act, which in event established the National Environment Management Authority.
Sure.
So you can see it's been really growing, and both at institutional level, at legislative level, at policy level. In 2015, again, we also had the National Climate Change Act, rather National Climate Change Policy.
To ratify the Paris Agreement.
The Paris Agreement,
yeah.
Great. And to that effect, the latest legislation that we had in 2021, the National Climate Change Act, has been a continuation of making sure that we domesticate all the provisions therein in the Paris Agreement.
In pursuit of environmental justice.
So I should say that when you look at what has been happening globally, coming down even at the regional level, talking about the East African climate change policy, and also at the national level, and also at the local level, the conversation and the actions towards achieving climate, environmental and climate justice has been really, really working in progress, both in actions, but also on the legislative front.
So I must say you've introduced a fundamental context. When I was preparing for this conversation, I'd hoped to maybe hear what, of course, you've done from a civil society angle, but the ground you seem to lay is that the journey towards where we are at is that we just don't find ourselves here. There is legislation, there are global ecosystems that lead us here. Okay, so right now I just want to get into the situation of Uganda. Let's say if you're ranking Uganda out of 10, how do you think they are doing in terms of pursuing and protecting the virtues and values of environmental justice? Let's say 1 out of 10.
I would say 5. I would say 5, yeah.
Where are the gaps?
Yeah, and 5, that's the average. Because first of all, as I laid out, there is already an enabling legal and policy framework, quite comprehensive. And I should say, be on record, that Uganda has one of the most progressive legal and policy regime that ensures and underpins the need for, for engendering climate, environment and climate justice. Of course, just like the people usually say that, having the law is one thing, but also implementing is another. In fact, on the street, people would say, because at the end of the day, you actually have the law in place.
That's true.
But when it comes to the implementation, where the rubber meets the tarmac, where you are supposed to really put the provisions that you have in the law and in the policies, that is where the big difference is. And for me, I would want to, first of all, even before I point out where the gaps, I would want also to look at, for example, as I've said, the legal framework is in place. There's also institutional framework, because after the enactment of the National Environment Act, the NEMA was put in place. The National Environment Management Authority was put in place. First was headed by Dr. Adiamanya Mugisha, then later on headed by Dr. Okrut, and right now being headed by Dr. Kankwasa Badirega. Because NEMA is the watchdog, is the legal watchdog for ensuring that we have environmental sustainability and environmental compliance and enforcement. I should say that Section 5 of the National Environment Act is very, very comprehensive, laying out the principles of environmental management, requiring every development to ensure that they carry out what you call environmental and social impact assessments. This is a command of the law that you cannot undertake any development. Even if CEPA, you would want to undergo into a project, the requirement of the law is that you must first submit an environmental impact assessment report. And to that effect, NEMA is supposed to actually to give you a certificate allowing you to actually undertake that project. And it doesn't only stop at that. It's supposed to continue supervising you to ensure whether actually you're really adhering to what you provided for in your environmental and impact assessment report.
Robert, can I ask just shortly?
Yes.
Have you been following the Nachivuo Channel project?
I've been, and I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. So the institutional framework is in place. When you look at, for example, Parliament has two committees: the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, currently headed by the Honorable Herbert Aliko. It was formerly being headed by the Honorable Emmanuel Otara. When you follow what they have been doing, you see that there's been a bit of some work going on at parliamentary level. There's also a committee we started with through the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, which later moved into the Committee on Climate Change, headed by now the Honorable Songa Lawrence. They've also been trying to do some work, but like I said, despite the presence of these institutional framework, when you talk about even the Ministry of Water and Environment, the different departments, for example, the Climate Change Department at the Ministry of Water and Environment, has really been very proactive to try and see that we mainstream climate change issues. But like I've said, there are bottlenecks. You have, for example, pointed out the elephant in the room, for example, the Nachivuo Channel and
Channel reconstruction project.
All the other projects, because personally, you made mention about
eviction
some
from
of the
Lubiji.
Yes, you've mentioned some of the work that we've been doing. I am personally, as I speak, I am in the East African Court of Justice as a petitioner, against the issue of Bugoma Forest, where, for example, in 2020, NEMA issued a certificate of environmental impact assessment to a developer to cut down to plant sugar canes in
cut down about a hectare or two.
You're talking about 9.24 square miles.
My goodness.
Yes, of that place.
Those are like how many acres?
Those when you convert in 600, when you have 600 acres from a hectare, then a hectare
600 so by 9.
You're talking about square miles. So it's a really very big chunk. Bugoma Forest catchment. Yeah, the developer got a certificate from NEMA.
Cut down 9 square miles of Bugoma Forest. So
we went to court. And later on we'll talk about the role of courts, because it's also very, very important at the institutional level. We went to court to challenge that giveaway, because Bugoma Forest is about 1,000 years old, and it's a very rich ecosystem. Having a lot of biodiversity therein, and harboring, having some of the most indigenous species. So we went to court. We first started going here in the High Court of Uganda as civil society organizations. We did not succeed. So I decided to really explore and exploit all the avenues. under the East African Treaty, a citizen can actually go to court to challenge anything to do with the rule of law, good governance, and environmental, rights. So currently our case is ongoing. I'm a petitioner through our lawyers of Chis and Advocates. Recently were in court on 22nd of October, where we appeared and we are really putting our evidence, because we are trying to see that environmental rights and environmental justice is not just only being talked about, but it must be realized.
Respected, yeah.
Yeah. So talking about, for example, some of those projects we've been talking about, like the Rubiji channel, the Nachuvo channel. Most of those projects you find they usually receive certificates from NEMA, and of course the loophole, I should say, that in the law is that the developer is the one who actually comes up with the report and then gives it to NEMA. Now, what NEMA does is to assess to see whether
the
actually
report is okay
whether
or
the
not.
report is okay. Then, tick the boxes, and then they issue the certificate.
It should be different.
It should be different because
just like they do
what we
with,
would expect is
with
that
I
it
think
should be
Capital
NEMA.
Markets Authority, the
Yes.
regulator should do the assessment.
Absolutely.
Maybe the developer should make a
What the developer
regulatory
does-
payment to NEMA, and NEMA does the actual assessment.
Absolutely. What the developer usually does is they hire a consultant. They hire a consultant like you, Joseph. They give you money, give you terms of reference, and then you do the work. But between me and you, we know that he who pays for the piper is the one who calls for
Determines
the
the
tune.
tune.
Yes. So it's quite unreasonable in my assessment, because when you look at all the developments where, for example, there has been environmental degradation, you find that when we go there in to really challenge them, because for us as civil society organizations and environmental defenders and climate activists, we've been very, very aggressive, especially in trying to push back on issues of environment and climate change. But when you actually challenge the developer, they show you the certificate, meaning that actually what they are doing is illegal. They are allowed by the developer, but you see what they are doing on the ground is not actually what they're supposed to do, because also the law, the National Environment Act, I think Section 76 says that you are supposed to ensure that you carry out what you call do environmental audits, file environmental audits to NEMA annually, periodically. But they usually don't do that, because one of the is partly the weakness of NEMA, but also NEMA has also challenges, funding constraints, being thin on the ground, human resource issues, and sometimes also the will. There's sometimes no will. So for me, I think that. As you've said, for example, Nachuvo channel, they received a certificate. They have a certificate from NEMA that allows them to carry out that project. But you have seen the extent of loss and damage that actually our people are really suffering. So for me, I think that as I've told you, why I really said, from 1 to 10 is about 5. We have the legal framework, we have the institutional framework in place, we have the policy framework, but the implementation is really, really, really very minimal on the ground. So, and during the amendment of the National Environment Act in 2019, some of us, the civil society actors, we suggested that we should be able to strengthen, NEMA by we made a provision that we should have an environmental protection unit. Because NEMA was saying that they only talk, they don't have enforcement. So we established in the law,
like the US has, the EPA.
Yes. So right now, as I speak, they actually have an enforcement unit. In fact, being commanded by a commissioner of police, a commandant, where they have been strengthened. They even worked together with UPDF. That's why, as we've said, when you saw recently in the enforcement of the Rubiji and the other wetland, it was really military operation. Of course, there's also a problem with that, because we have also been saying, if you are going to enforce environmental rights, it is important that you also should be able to observe, the human rights-based approach. Because you saw, for example, that famous photo of an old woman, Jajana Mudu, who was, holding a chicken in the hands. Because you see, the issue at the bedrock of environmental justice is that you must ensure that we observe and enjoy all the other rights in tandem with environmental rights. With
other rights
yes.
too.
Whether you're talking about housing rights, you're talking about land rights, you're talking about the rights to dignity and privacy. All these rights are in place.
You make a very important point there.
Yes.
And in the second segment of the podcast, I would like us to just get into how exactly we need to reform the court system in Uganda to effectively respond to the needs that are the needs of the everyday Ugandan, which is the right to a clean and healthy environment, free from the forces of capitalism or the forces of corrupt politicians.
Let's talk about human rights. Human rights are the basic freedoms and protections that belong to every person simply because they are human. These include the right to speak your mind, to meet peacefully with others, to participate in decisions that affect your life, and to live with dignity and fairness. They are not special privileges, they are legal guarantees found in Uganda's 1995 constitution and international treaties. Human rights matter in everyday life, from being heard in your community to accessing public services to feeling safe online or offline. The Civic Space Initiative is here to help people understand, protect, and use these rights. Through education, training, and dialogue, we are building a stronger, more informed society where people can stand up, speak out, and shape their future. Because when you know your rights, you can claim them. Learn more at www.cepa.or.ug or www.asf.be.
You're most welcome again to the Policy Digest podcast. Again, this is being shot at the CEPA studios. In case you're out there and want to record your podcast, in case you have events and you want us to cover them with photography and excellent videography services, we're here to help you. But I just want to get back to Robert. So Robert, in the Twitter space we had, that digital town hall, towards the end, you did say that there's a need for a dedicated environmental justice division of the court system. I just want to get your picture on what it would look like and how such a division would complement or reform existing frameworks like NEMA, Ministry of Water and Environment, Uganda Human Rights Commission, and the judiciary.
Yeah, it would. It is true that I recommended the same because I was recently in Kenya, in Nairobi. And, because of the part of what we do, we try to always build synergies with like-minded, defenders across the region. So I should say sort of like benchmarking. When you look at, for example, Kenya has a land and environment court division at the High Court. And at the regional level, they have environmental courts. The reason why I recommend that Uganda time has come for us to have an environmental court division is to ensure that, because there are two critical issues. Number one, when you look at environmental cases, environmental and climate justice cases, they, first of all, they need to be handled expeditiously. An average of 1 year, they should be disposed of. Two, they are very technical in nature. Because between me and you, as you said in the preamble, not everybody is really so much interested in these things. Personally, I really am a strong voice in this, climate space because I have interested myself and schooled myself in these things. I do a lot of reading. Most of these things are really technical. They are scientific. So you find that when you file a case, at the High Court, you have to really do a lot of environmental research and climate justice issues. They are very, very technical. Whether you're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, you're talking about issues of biodiversity, you're talking about issues of ecosystems, they are very scientific and very technical. Now, the way how our judicial system is right now, the judges are not so much interested in these, very technical issues. They so much want to, hear the usual cases that usually come to them.
Political rights, business.
So the setup we have right now is that if you are going to fire, because our constitution under Article 50 gives every citizen power and mandate to actually institute a case. In case you fear someone's rights or even your rights have been violated under public interest, you can file a case. And as I've told you, some of the cases that we have actually done, you find that when you go to court to file, you have to go to the civil division. Now, the civil division of the High Court, when you look at, for example, our judiciary, the High Court has about, I think now about 80 judges now, because there's been an increase in the number. And we have about now, I think, 7 divisions. We talk about criminal division, talk about land division, talk about civil division, family division, the anti-corruption division, international crimes, and which other one? So we don't have a division specifically dedicated to hear matters of environment and climate justice. What you do is that you file in the civil division. Now, the civil division, when you see the average of the cases that are at High Court, you find you have about 1,000 cases. Now, when you divide by about 7 divisions, you find, for example, each division, has a number of cases. So the problem we are having right now is that there is a lot of case backlog. And that's why you see you can actually file a case now and it will take 5, 6, 10, 15 years.
And by that time, like a case of Ugoma,
yes,
have they cut down the trees? They cleared
the sugarcanes, even the president recently was there and was asking that who gave permission to the cutting down of.
So by the time they get your
by the
case,
time you get a decision,
people are eating sugar canes off that land.
They're already on another harvest. You get it. So because see, what our listener needs to take note of that most of these environmental degradation, projects, usually they at the heart of them is actually land grabbing. They want to get the land, so they will once they have actually really reclaimed the land, it is theirs, and you can change the land use. So we've been recommending, and I want to thank many civil society organizations and climate activists that have been really adding their voice on the need for us to have a dedicated, high court division to work on environmental and climate justice issues. Because as I've told you, the rate at which, for example, in Kenya, the court is disposing of cases on environment and climate change is much, much higher. And also the judiciary.
And maybe more injunctions before someone does development on that land.
And the judicial officers in that department, periodically undergo, technical, training in environmental and climate change issues. Let me show you a classic example. Right now, our position as a country under the Climate Action Plan in the NDC framework is that we should be able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to the tune of 24.7% by the year 2030. Now, when you see what is expected is that every project in Uganda is supposed to file its annual returns on how much it is emitting into the atmosphere. And if you find that a project is actually, not performing as expected, then it is supposed to be subject of what? Of litigation. And for us as climate activists, we've been trying to say that, once we actually have, a judicial, because as we've talked about the issue of environmental justice, you cannot have environmental justice without having an efficient and tailor-made judicial process that is going to ensure that we actually achieve environmental and climate justice. Because we must ensure that we protect the vulnerable. Now, let me show you another classic example. When you look at the National Climate Change Act, I think Section 30, it provides for the need for us to have carbon trade and carbon markets. That, for example, Joseph, if a company they come to you and they find that you have your 10 hectares of forest, they can actually pay you for the amount of money and to be able to compensate you, sort of like you trade in the carbon, because forests and trees are carbon sinks. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So if now they find that you actually have this number of trees in your forest, you are supposed to be able to earn from that. And it's now business. There are really serious global carbon investments, and there's what you can call a carbon rush, where companies are moving from the global north and coming here in Africa, in Uganda in particular, to actually get involved in the carbon trade. But there's going to be a lot of arbitration, disagreements, because we're talking about issues of land,
disputes,
issues of
economic disputes,
business and human rights issues, corporate accountability,
ESG, environmental,
social governance issues, where you even find, for example, that the most vulnerable are being taken advantage of. They need to be protected. So all these, arbitration mechanisms, they need to be, undertaken in an efficient, tailor-made, intentional judicial system where we can actually have a court system. Now, for Kenya, what Kenya did is that they even amended their National Climate Change Act and, National Climate Change Act, and they integrated, carbon trade and carbon markets. So whenever there are disputes, they actually go to court. We're even trying to look at some of the cases which they've even had and even disposed of. But we're having a big problem. When you look at, for example, the commercial division of Uganda, I remember one time the Honorable Mao was even saying that we are having over 80 trillion Ugandan shillings being stuck in the commercial division because the cases take long.
That's bad for business.
It's bad for business. It's bad for justice, economic justice.
Same thing with the environment.
Absolutely.
There's delay of justice. That's bad for health.
And justice delayed is justice denied.
And I just to ask there, what would it take for Uganda to institutionalize it? Is there a time in Ugandan history where there was no division of the High Court and then it ended up happening? And so let's say at the beginning of Uganda, the Ugandan constitution or Ugandan legal jurisprudence, was there a time where there's like a division of the High Court, it didn't exist, and then it was instituted? And in that case, what steps would we take to ensure that there's like an environmental division of the High Court? Do we need to go to Parliament? Do we need to go to the street? What do you need to do?
Well, for us as environmental defenders and colleagues in the civil society, because I personally run a network, of environmental, community-based organizations and environmental defenders and climate activists, really, we've been having a joint voice, especially on that. The time has come for us to actually have a specialized, and it can be two-pronged, because this is an administrative issue. The creation of different divisions is an administrative issue. The chief justice can even, declare that.
Wow.
By the way, when you look at NDP, when you take time off and read the NDP 3, the one we finished, they had proposed the establishing it the same, because we've been at it. We've been, working closely with other organizations, Environmental Art, Green Watch. All of us as environmental defenders are advocating for the same. Let me show you something. Before we went to the East African Court of Justice for the Goma Forest case, we had filed 2 cases in the High Court of Uganda. The first case was under judicial review that we first filed together with other organizations, and it was flushed out. It was dismissed. We again went back and filed another case for the Human Rights Enforcement Act. Again, it was also dismissed. So we realized that our judicial system is not really willing to listen to this environmental issue. That's why we had to go to the East African Court of Justice. When you read the jurisprudence, the environmental jurisprudence, you realize that out of 10 cases of environment that have been filed at the High Court of Uganda in the Civil Division, you find that almost like 1 or 2, you will get a positive decision. About 8, the matters will be dismissed out. Until recently, when we filed in the High Court of Uganda, in Jinja, we filed a case for the protection of indigenous species, the mivule trees. There's a Chinese company that wanted to cut down the mivule trees in Jinja, and we filed through our lawyers, which is an advocates, and Council Teguri. We filed a case to have a permanent injunction arguing. First of all, we had 2 arguments. Number 1, ensure that we protect urban forestry. Because when you talk about the urban forestry, you're talking about the air quality in the city. Look at, for example, like Kampala. Many trees have been cut down. And most of the cities, the trees have been cut down. First of all, endangering the biodiversity in the city, but also disrupting the air quality of the city. So we made a very strong argument. Personally, I depended on a very, very powerful affidavit trying to argue that we need to protect these indigenous species. Because you need to understand, for example, like the state of environment in our country. Our forest cover has been going down. In 1990, we had about 24% of the forest cover. But it has been going down to 8%. Now it has been a bit increasing according to NEMA. So we need to deliberately protect the indigenous species. Whether you're talking about the mivule trees, the mwafu trees, the mutuba, the musizi, all these indigenous trees, they need to be protected. Because we see a lot because of agroforestry. We see many people going to planting of pine and planting of eucalyptus trees. Now, those species, they actually endanger the environment further. So we must protect the indigenous. I want to report that we got a very good decision. Where we got a permanent injunction. Late Justice Dr. Nabisinde gave us a permanent injunction. And right now, as I speak, the trees are still there. Those trees were planted by the great Semeika Kunguru. More than 100 years ago.
Chinese wants to cut them down.
They want to cut them down. And very, very disastrous. So the reason why we need a court system, a judicial system that is tailor-made on ensuring that we mainstream environmental and climate justice is because of the growing demand globally. You know that recently the UN General Assembly actually adopted the right to a clean and healthy environment through a UN resolution as a global, consensus that every country must ensure that we have a human rights-based approach in ensuring that we uphold the right to a clean and healthy environment. And you read the recent decision of the International Court of Justice, the advisory note, that now countries can actually sue. If, for example, Uganda believes that another country has actually violated, you can actually sue. And therefore, the jurisprudence, the environmental activism, the environmental advocacy for ensuring that we have, robust and sustainable environmental and climate justice, especially that caters and protects the most vulnerable in our community is actually growing. And for me, what it really excites me and gives me hope is that our work as environmental human rights defenders is not in vain. Because time and again, we've been trying to ensure that how do we ensure that we've been advocating. Of course, sometimes we are dismissed as noise makers. They say for us we are causing confusion. We are always making noise.
Don't know that you are John the Baptist. You are telling people something is wrong, and that's what I want us to talk about.
They are saying that we are fighting development, that we are conserving poverty, but the issues we are raising, they are very, very pertinent. Look at, for example, the extent to which we are losing lives and property due to climate-related disasters. When you move across the country,
that's not
Uganda,
conserving poverty, it's conserving the actual livelihood.
Absolutely, and the well-being of the people. You talk about whether
what's the point of making money if the environment is going to give you every cancer with every name which now comes,
and it doesn't make sense.
For us to you make the money, still goes flat to your medical bills. Yes.
We lose it. We have a development, but when we actually, our people, lives of our people actually being endangered, and we continue to lose. Go to the Elgon sub-region. There's a Bay sub-region where you see continuous mudslides and landslides where people get buried. Just the most recent one was about 30 people.
In Queen,
to the Rwenzori sub-region, River Nyamwamba, every year, you can be sure it will bust the banks and be able to, bury our people. So you see the country being, a disaster hotspot where the most vulnerable are being, rendered even more vulnerable. We are so susceptible to the effects of climate change. And therefore, when you look at, for example, the efforts that the Ministry of Water and Environment, because you asked how does establishing,
this court supplement
the efforts. The Ministry of Water and Environment, under the National Climate Action Plan and the NDC framework, has been very categorical that we must prioritize two things. Number one, undertake what you call a change in land use under the Aforo arrangement, where you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about forestry and land use, Aforo. Now, agriculture is both a victim and a contributor to climate change because you have 67% of the population stuck in subsistence farming. So how do we ensure that we promote climate-smart agriculture and build the adaptive capacity of the people who are in subsistence farming? How do we ensure that we do mechanized agriculture? How do we ensure that we do irrigation to see that we support these people? Under forestry, promoting, people planting trees, because right now we need to plant over 100,000 hectares per year up to the year 2040 to be able to go back to 24% of the pre-1990 forest cover. So for us to do that, we need to have over 40 million trees planted every year to be able to recover. But you see, continuous. The most recent is Chituburu Forest in Entebbe. You saw the reports. So when you look at most of the natural forests, whether you're talking about Zoka Forest in Ajumani, whether you're talking about Budongo Forest, whether you're talking about my very own Bugoma Forest, whether you're talking about Mavira, all these forests are all under attack. So there's no way we are going to restore our ecosystems and restore our forest cover when we continue cutting down these natural forests. Because you see, we talk about carbon sequestration. So the forestry arrangement, although we promote agroforestry, but we must also first conserve. Then the land use, change of land use. The problem we are having is that there's a lot of reclamation, settling in the wetlands. We have lost wetlands from 15% to now 11.5%. And it is likely to continue. We are likely to lose more wetland cover. And the wetlands are actually, they also do their carbon sinks. They actually also absorb. One of the reasons we are having all this flooding in the cities, especially in Kampala, is because the wetlands which actually help to hold the water
have been reclaimed.
Settled
so the water has nowhere to go.
Water has nowhere to go, despite,
it ends up in shopping malls and
entering people's lives, clearing people's lives, and also posing a very big environmental health hazard. So we must understand under the intervention of the Ministry of Water and Environment and the different departments, there is a deliberate effort on the part of government to see that we can actually, salvage the situation. But to see all that to be done, we need to be deliberate in funding, because at the center of this is the issue of climate financing, and that will take me to the issue of the COPs, the Conference of Parties. Under the NDC framework, government has focused that we need, as I said earlier on, we need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions to the tune of 24.7%. By the way, the NDC now is being even revised to even raise the ambition, because that was a resolution at COP29. Now, for us to do that, government has costed that we need to mobilize over 28.1 billion US dollar to be able to achieve and implement our climate action plan as a country. Now, if you're talking about that amount of money, you know what our budget is, about 12, 13, 15 billion US dollars. So you need, for us to raise 28.1 billion US dollars, you need about 5.5 billion US dollars per year. That's a lot of money. When you look at how much climate finance has been flowing into the country, according to the Ministry of Finance, Climate Finance Unit, they are showing that we have so far received about 500 million US dollars. And of course, for us as climate
against,
activists,
5 billion.
Against 5 billion that we're supposed to raise,
So
per year.
we are short by 20.
Recently, the most recent money that came in was the 31 million, where you saw the report, where Uganda was recognized under what you call the performance, the result-based financing. 31 million is about 108 billion Uganda shillings. Yeah. So, ordinarily, that money would be very, very good because it would actually help to build the adaptive capacity of our communities, to be able to support, budget support, especially on climate finance. But the problem we also have is that sometimes when this money comes in, it actually doesn't play the role it's supposed to play. You saw the report from the IGG, how much money we are losing in corruption. So most of this money actually gets lost, gets misappropriated, and
that
really
becomes a justice issue at the end of
becomes
the
a justice issue, because now if money, issues of accountability,
meant for climate,
issues of accountability,
either from the World Bank or from government,
absolutely,
gets misused.
Government recently received also money in a loan in climate for promoting climate smart agriculture. I think about 226 million US dollars.
I see. When you go to Parliament Watch Loans Tracker, I see the loan.
You get it.
Yeah.
So when you look at the reports that, for example, the Auditor General has published about the issue of climate finance, because I want to say that when you look at the climate action plan for Uganda, there are three critical issues. Number one is capacity building. You said people don't know these things of climate change.
They don't.
There are not very many people that will actually know
well.
these things, for example, the way I know them. Yeah. Because for me, I've deliberately interested myself there. So building capacity for both government, civil society, and the private sector to understand these dynamics. But also the issue of gender mainstreaming to ensure that the most vulnerable, the women who are on the end of the value chain, the youth, the people, the poor people, the people with disabilities, that they are supported under gender mainstreaming. But also the issue of climate financing. Now, at the global level, at COP29, Uganda, we are part of the negotiating team. We have an entire delegation of Uganda that actually negotiates on behalf of Uganda. And we were negotiating for 1.3 trillion US dollars as money to be able to help the global community to set we combat the effects of climate change. But I want to say that by the end of COP29, which was in Azerbaijan, we only $300 billion was pledged to be raised
Uganda
per year up to the year 2035.
For Uganda?
No, globally. Of course,
against 1.3 trillion.
Against 1.3. Now, as we go to Brazil for the COP30, the conversation is that we should again reignite that, because
for
when you look at, for example,
trillion, yes,
the extent to which climate-related disasters are affecting people globally, the cost is that we need to mobilize about 2.3 trillion US dollars to be able to manage the extent of disasters globally. And of course, when you look at the adaptive capacity for example, like for Africa, it is 18 times more than the money that is available right now in climate finance to be able to build adaptation. Because at the global level, we talk about adaptation, we talk about mitigation, and also talk about nature-based solutions. So for a country like Uganda, which is nature dependent, which is where you have 80% of the people in agriculture, whether you find that almost the economy is really relying on nature, then you must be deliberate in ensuring that you actually build the adaptive capacity, first of all for the local communities, but also the infrastructure. When you move across the country, now most of the roads have been really ravaged by the heavy rains, and have the potholes, you have all the roads being washed down. So we must be deliberate to ensure that we don't only look at the issue of climate change only from an environmental lens, but look at it from social justice, economic, and also developmental issue. Where you find, for example, right now, the biggest threat, government has, for example, rolled out the 10-fold growth strategy. The Ministry of Finance, they have committed
500 billion
that we, in the next 15 years, by 2040, we should be able to grow our GDP by 10 times from the kind of 50 billion US dollars to about 500 billion US dollars. Now, to do that, the focus of government is to see that there are 5 areas that are focused on: ATMs, agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral resources, science, technology, and innovation. Now, As I told you, agriculture is both a victim and a contributor to effects of climate change. Therefore, we must be able to look at the conversation around climate change, disaster risk reduction, and economic sustainability in the lens of how do we climate-proof all development projects, but also ensure there is climate budget tagging, that we put money in the areas where most of the people are and they are more vulnerable to effects of climate change. And that's why some of us have been demanding for establishment of a disaster fund. When you look at the Constitution, Article 249 of the Constitution, it commands that there shall be a disaster commission which should be able to help the country to efficiently, first of all, prepare the country for disaster preparedness, but also be able to help in building the capacity through other warning mechanisms, and also put money in place, not only for disaster response, but disaster preparedness. But when you look at, for example, what we're having right now, you saw what happened in Deborah. Someone made a funny comparison where Kenya on their side, they were having planes, flying people, the people have been, then for us, we're having holes, digging and what, and this has been happening. So we don't seem to have a dependable disaster risk management program. We just only wait for the disaster to happen, and we just only come running, and we don't seem to really prepare.
Yes.
And therefore, the issue of climate change, both from the global level to the regional level, to the the national level, and also community level, I can tell you that right now, and for me, really, I should be really very,
and as you give your closing remarks,
yes.
Sure.
When you see young people, how many young people are really speaking out? Of course, we have had a lot of setbacks as a global movement, as a climate movement. When we talk about, for example, President Donald Trump and other people who are really dismissing climate change as a hoax. I know also some of my friends also say climate change is not real. But you don't have to really believe that climate change is real or not real. You only have to look at the extent of the damage and the loss that our communities are really suffering from. So I want to salute the young people out there that have been very categorical in, first of all, putting their voices on the front line. Because to young people, the destruction of the planet is personal. They will not, they have all the time ahead of them. So any destruction of the environment, any destruction of our climate, making the planet less habitable and less safe and not clean and healthy for all of us living, it is really for their concern. The civil society organizations, environmental civil society organizations, they have been very categorical, speaking out about these issues. But also, I want us to go beyond just speaking, also actions. Because I can tell you, even when we demand governments to do better, because the governments actually have a proactive role, the ones that they are the primary duty bearers, as I've said.
That's true.
They have the backstops with the government. But we as civil society organizations, Article 38 of the Constitution empowers us as civil society organizations, as climate activists, as environmental human rights defenders, to play our role, play a complementary role, especially where government has not played its role, to actually back them up, especially raising these issues to the understanding of that, but also play a civic role. And of course, ensure, if you can plant a tree, I've told you about the need to plant 40 million trees. Uganda, we are about 45 million Ugandans now. So imagine, for example, if each one of us planted a tree, we would actually be able to, save the situation. So I think beyond, calling out government, government must play its role, but we also as citizens, as civil society organizations, as religious leaders, as cultural institutions, all of us, local leaders, we must be able to stand out and put our actions on the ground. Finally, I have been looking at the role of local government, because you see, the real and this is the elephant in the room. Why I was talking about the issue of, for example, the Kenyan example, is that where they have the High Court Division for Environment and Climate Justice, they also have regional courts. Now here, what we have in Uganda, every district has a district environmental resource officer, district forest officer, district natural resource officer. They are there. And all those constitute into what we call the disaster risk management committees at the district.
Sure.
Now, I have been moving across the country. I can tell you that these committees, they're actually just there in words, but they're not there in action.
They're not working. Yeah.
Why? When you ask them, they're saying no funding. So I would want to call out a clarion call to government. Now we are in the budget cycle of 2025-2026, all right?
6-7.
And now we have rolled out 2026-2027.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the current budget, local government received about 13.5% of the funding. I would like to say that we should increase this funding to ensure that these disaster committees actually are activated, constituted and activated, because they are the ones on the ground where the real climate disasters are happening. And therefore, I would want to see these committees swing into action to be able to work with the local leaders to so that we can be able to save the situation.
That's true.
Of course, for me, I am very happy with the media, CEPA and other media houses and online spaces to try and see that we trumpet these issues. Because personally, as an individual, my voice alone is not enough.
That's
but when
true.
I get an opportunity to really engage, our audience, you who is watching out there, you also have a role to play. Don't think that no, you also are concerned. Please, when you see something, happening, someone is, throwing bottles into the drainage channels, whether somebody is really cutting the tree, whether someone is settling in the wetland, we must be deliberate in creating awareness and educate our communities and be able to say that we sensitize every person, because all of us have a role to play. Not just only sitting back and complain, but we all must put our hands on the deck. We can't afford to have anybody on the sidelines. All of us must really play our part as citizens of this country.
Thank you so much, Robert. It was good having you, and the case couldn't be any more clearer.
Yes.
Yes, the Holy Scriptures say that he who has ears, let them hear. We hope you, the legislator that was watching, you, the citizen that was watching, you, the young person who is going to live in the world that you want to be better in a healthy and clean way, you've been listening, and that in our lifetime we will see to it that we have an environmental division of the court system of Uganda. Thank you, and see you another time.
Why should we care about human rights? Because they are the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. Human rights ensure that every person, no matter who they are, has the right to express an opinion, belong to a group, take part in their country's decisions, and live with dignity. These rights protect us all in schools, in communities, at workplaces, online, and in public life. When human rights are respected, societies are fairer, safer, and more inclusive. But when they're ignored or abused, people lose their voice and their power. The Civic Space Initiative exists to make sure that doesn't happen. Together with communities, civil society, and institutions, we are strengthening the knowledge and tools needed to defend civic freedoms and uphold the rule of law. Because when human rights thrive, everyone benefits. Visit www.cepa.or.ug or www.asf.be to find out how you can be part of the movement to protect and promote human dignity. Your rights, your voice, your future. This message is brought to you by the Center for Policy Analysis together with ASF in partnership with the Belgian Partner in Development.
Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest podcast, the Center for Policy Analysis podcast that is profiling African ideas and people that are shaping the future of their communities. Subscribe to all our platforms on YouTube and Podbean.